Okay, welcome to the stream, ladies and gents. We're streaming today on YouTube, X, Facebook. Although I don't like Facebook, but we're streaming there, and we're still trying to get the Rumble connection set up, so that should be next week. But we're going to talk today about some crazy stuff that's happening. I mean, it's not very often that we get these, what they call red alerts and everything like that. And I've been really going through all of this and reading all these articles and getting caught up with everything going on with all the conflict at the moment. And it's really getting quite out of hand and crazy with what they're talking about. Now, especially if you are French, then you definitely need to watch this. If you're British, UK, you need to watch this. And then it goes to Poland and then USA. These are the sort of countries now that is about to all kick off. It's absolutely wild what's about to happen. So let's go straight to the studio share then. Should be enough time for everyone to jump in. And let's get started with all this. So you've probably seen on a lot of the mainstream media, Russia's to hold these nuclear drills following threats from the West. So the BBC's done loads of stuff on this. They've been talking about this, but they're not, as usual, giving full context to everything. Last week, Macron refused, so President of France, refused to rule out potentially deploying French troops. This is in Ukraine. So the reason this is so serious, and we'll talk about steadfast defender in a moment and Article 5, which was also mentioned. Article 5 is where one NATO ally is attacked. It triggers Article 5, and then all NATO allies are supposed to come to the aid. So this is why they're saying that what's happening at the moment is changing the game with everything happening in Ukraine currently, because if Macron does send French troops, which he's talking about, and they do have conflict with Russian troops, they're talking about Article 5 and NATO and all this other stuff. Now, we've heard this a lot, and, I've talked about it before, but it's really this interview he's just given, as well as what Poland has just said, and the US has just said, and now Cameron in the UK has just said, that I'm thinking things have shifted a little bit, and I need to update you on a few things. So Lord Cameron, he's a lord now, David Cameron. How on earth that happened, who knows? But he's a lord now. He said Ukraine had the right to use British weapons for strikes within Russia. Now, this is another key distinction that's changed. So this is now using British weaponry to strike within Russia. Now, this changes the game because we knew it was happening before, but now it's politically being discussed. And on Monday, Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that Cameron's hostile outbursts contradicted previous British assurances that the long-range missiles sent to Ukraine would not be used on Russian territory. And they're saying now the UK is party to the conflict. And on top of this then, Cameron's committed, he said we're going to be now sending weapons and money for as long as it takes, $3.7 billion annually. This is what Cameron has just announced. So he's saying as long as it takes, this is going to go on. Some of that equipment is actually arriving there today while he's here, he said. Alarmingly, he openly stated that the British government has no problem with Ukrainian forces using UK weapons to strike at targets inside Russian territory. Now, let's just pause a moment here. Without getting political about all of this, as you know, I try and look at this very neutral, even though it's tough because I'm in the British region on the Isle of Man. So if the Russian threats ever come to through, I'm in big trouble. I don't think these stone walls of my place is going to stop a tidal wave or whatever. You see all these videos all the time, whether they're propaganda or a forecast, who knows. But it's getting absolutely crazy, all of this stuff. Now, you've got to look at this escalation and how it started and where we are now. And it's exactly what we talked about before, and a lot of you left it in the comments. It's like stepping stones. So first of all, it's just, food aid, then it's this aid, then it's that aid. Next thing it's, well, we're just going to send a few ammunition rounds, we're going to send this, then it's tanks, then it's this. And now we're at the point where France is saying we're going to send ground troops, or they're not ruling out sending ground troops, and that it's very likely they're going to do it. Now, this really changes the game, and the whole thing is changing now, you see. So this pulls in the UK, and this is exactly why we've been hearing all this talk about conscription, and that people will have to be conscripted, and they talked about the age groups and how this was all going to be planned out and happening. So it makes a lot of sense now once you start to put it all together. And I don't see this as de-escalation. I see it's escalating. And honestly, if I were in your position, I would have a plan B. I mean, I talk about this a lot. I just made a video. If you haven't gone over to the Patreon, feel free to go over there and have a look. I made a video on Saturday and also posted one on Sunday there where I talked about all of this and my plan B. And I was really saying to everyone that you also need to have a plan B, because unless you want to get, if you're in any of these Western countries, this is inevitable. We're in the fourth turning cycle. I don't think there's a single fourth turning cycle when you go back hundreds and hundreds of years that it hasn't ended with some sort of military conflict when we're in these events, because they tend to just spiral downwards. So I'm not being alarmist here. I know people sometimes think that. I'm being very practical. You should think about what else you're going to do here if this really all begins to happen. Some people will say, oh, I'm going to be on the front line. Oh, yeah. And I look at the guy and I say, really? You're going to be on the front line, are you? Okay. He's in his, in McDonald's every day. can't jog, can't lift anything, but he's on the, yeah, of course you are, my friend. You're on the front line, right? But let's be realistic here. If this sort of conflict breaks out, everyone needs to have a plan, whether that's looking at, oh, well, you work online so you can go somewhere else and work remotely, or, whatever you're going to do, you've got to have a plan here for this sort of stuff. Most people have no plan. And what's going to happen is, remember, this is what this channel's about. It's not just about conflict like this. It's about everything. It's about preparing you for this uncertain future. Another video I made this weekend was on artificial intelligence, or AGI, artificial general intelligence. This is going to wipe out hundreds of millions of jobs very, very quickly. And people don't even know about this. You don't hear about this much in the media and what's going on. This stuff is coming, and it's coming very, very quickly. This is some serious stuff coming down the line, and people aren't aware and they're not prepared. Let's jump back in. So this is what he has said then. Ukraine has that right, just as Russia is striking inside Ukraine. You can understand why Ukraine feels the need to make sure it's defending itself. Okay, fair enough. I don't think there's anything wrong with that statement in terms of defense. What worries me is that British weapons are being used in Russia on Russian targets when we weren't really involved in all this, and now we've been pulled in by a couple of politicians who think that's a good idea. I don't. Last Sunday, Zelensky himself signals as much in a nightly video address, saying he's working with Washington on a bilateral security agreement which would last 10 years. Now, this is what I thought was funny about this. If you've heard about this new agreement that's supposed to be going on, they're writing out this contract, and again, it's still going on through Congress and everything. They're doing this contract that says whoever is the next president, they will not be able to get out of this funding agreement because there's a contract for the next 10 years. We all know who's going to be the next president. It's pretty obvious. Do you honestly think he's going to say, oh, yeah, yep, I need to honor that contract? Oh, yeah. Of course he's not. He's going to rip that contract up straight away. I mean, some of the stuff we're seeing is mind-blowing to me. So yeah, it's going to be fixed for the next 10 years. Of course it is, sure. As we've been detailing, the problem currently is not fundamentally a question of funding or weaponry, but of manpower. Now, I've highlighted this because it's so key. And this is why I think we're now at the stage of everyone talking about troops, which is being led by Macron. Now, this is what I think is the issue. In fact, let's take this off a second now. This is what I think is the issue with the whole manpower aspect. We're hearing different reports that the casualty numbers on both sides, it's not just Ukrainian sides, but we're hearing the casualty numbers have been massive. And if you run out of men as a country, anyone who's been in the military, you understand this concept, right? If you run out of people to serve, Macron's already said that it's not an option for Russia to win the war or the conflict, right? He said it's not an option. It's not even on the table. They'll do whatever they have to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, you think about this logically. What does that mean then? If there's no more men available, because they're no longer, you see, we can't even use words on a couple of these platforms here, Facebook, YouTube. Oh, the irony, right? You've got to look into this. What does that mean? It means these men are no longer alive. Well, the others have fled the country. Well, they're going to need troops. What does that mean? We're not at the stage yet where we've got the Atlas fighters, right? You know, these robot drones and everything else. We're not at that stage yet. It's coming. It's getting there very, very quickly, but we're still years off. There's a lot of R&D and everything else that's got to go into that. So it means humans. It means men and women, okay? Equal rights now and all of that. That's what it means for this conflict. And are they just gonna hold, oh yeah, let's just wait 5 years until we've got all these drones that if you haven't seen any of those videos, they're really interesting to watch with the military bipod drones now, right? It's really interesting to see where they're at, and they're getting better and better every day. I still think they're 5 years off, but you never know with AI now. So that's what they're talking about when it comes to manpower. AP, Russia warns Britain and plans nuclear drills over the West's possible deepening role in Ukraine. So they're doing all these tests, and there's a lot going on with all this now. So this just happened yesterday. They threatened to strike British military facilities and said it will hold drills simulating the use of battlefield nuclear weapons. And they're going to be doing all of these exercises now to strike Western targets. Now, what the West is saying is, oh, you can't do this. You can't do these exercises. This is illegal. It's a criminal war act. Sorry? Sorry? Steadfast Defender. I mean, I'm trying to be neutral here. Operation Steadfast Defender. For context, 80 of these fighter jets, helicopters, 50 warships and carriers, 1,100 combat vehicles, 90,000 troops near the Russian border. Okay, I've got no dog in this fight because I'll be out. I'm not getting involved in all this. But I do find it amusing that they say this is illegal. Russia cannot do these exercises to simulate attacking Western targets or British or whatever. This is what's caused a lot of this Steadfast Defender. And this is what we're talking about, Article 5 now, which is why it's now in discussion, Article 5. If one is attacked, then all are attacked, and they commit to solidarity, which basically means a massive battle. But there we go. After summoning the British ambassador, Moscow warned that Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory with UK-supplied weapons could bring retaliatory strikes on British military facilities and equipment or elsewhere, they say. So that means elsewhere, not just, I'm trying to avoid using the word Ukraine too often, or the video is going to get taken down like it usually does. Macron reaffirms possibility of sending these troops to Ukraine. Yeah, that's what he's now saying. I've got the transcript as well of the interview here. So we'll have a quick look at the transcript. And I would highly recommend that you go on here, it's on the Economist website, and read this because it gives you a really good insight into what's actually coming. So a couple of points from it. I'm not ruling anything out because we're facing someone who is not ruling anything out as well. So he's talking about Putin here. Some analysts believe that Russia could be on the verge of launching a major new offensive. Macron said if Russia decided to go further, we will in any case all have to ask ourselves the question of sending troops, describing his refusal to rule out this with, and he said it's a wake-up call for other nations, so other EU nations. So he described Russia as a power of regional destabilization and a threat to European security. I have a clear strategic objective. I can't get my words out today. It's probably because I haven't streamed properly in a week. Russia cannot win, he's saying. That is his stance. They cannot win. Now, who else? This just came out yesterday. The Polish foreign minister also said he's not ruling out sending troops as well. This was yesterday. So we've had now France, we've had Poland. The UK is saying that they will also not rule it out, but they won't be looking to do it anytime soon. The US has also said that it's a last resort. So we know the strategy here. And I mean, I'm not a military guru analyst, but I just look at things very logically. And I think what we're seeing is the reason a lot of the countries are sending weapons or aid, as they call it, it's not aid, it's weapons, is because it's acting more as a proxy, is how I see it. Because if they don't send the weapons, they're going to have to send their own military. And I think a lot of Western nations are just not ready for that. They're not ready to get into this sort of conflict. And this is why I think it's going through the media at the moment, and it will go through stages. So we'll see it going through the media. We'll see a lot of propaganda is what it is. It's to, and by the way, not all propaganda is bad. Just to get that out of the way. Some people just hear the word and they think, oh, that's bad. Not all propaganda is bad. Let's just leave it at that. But we'll see these stages going through now, and we already saw the first initial stages. Then we're seeing the everywhere published at the same time about conscription. Then we start to see things about people need to get fitter and stronger in case there's a conflict. And then so it's going to keep going until we get into these conflicts. Let's move on to this one. Okay, so I wanted to look up, I went on to Statista to see, because they're talking about all these nukes now being dropped. And that's interesting because there's a new TV show just come out called Fallout, which is on Amazon. And Fallout is all about nukes being dropped and people living in underground bunkers. So I think that's quite interesting that that's on there. So this is Russia. Like, you think France talking about, oh, well, we've got nukes as well. Yeah, you have. You've got like 280. Look at what Russia's got here. I mean, it's insane. And I went through and I was looking at some of their program. I mean, this would just be the end anyway. If we got into this stage, I'm hoping and praying we never get into this stage, because it would just be game over. None of us want this. We want de-escalation. How we're going to get that, look, I can't tell you myself, but I just hope that we do. And we just had the former UK Joint Forces Commander, General Sir Richard Barons, said that Ukraine is at serious risk of having to admit defeat to Russia this year. So this is 2024. Now, if that's the case, we already know the plan under NATO and Macron, that they will not allow it. They've already said it is not an option, that nothing is off the table. So that to me means troops or other equipment. So it is a little bit worrying, actually. So let's have a look at what Macron had to say there. And it is worth reading through this. We can't go through all of this because it would take an hour to go through it all. So he said, so this was with The Economist. In your speech, you said that Europe can die. What did that actually mean? And Macron said, Europe is not the safest region in the world. And I would agree with that. It really isn't the safest region in the world. In fact, let's take a moment to talk about that. You know, when I was growing up, Europe was such a safe place. I remember even as a kid when I was, 13 years old, we would go on school trips. Each year we'd go to different places and we'd go on a coach trip around. It was so safe and everything was beautiful. If you're my age, or, well, it doesn't matter what age you are, but if you remember Europe when you were, a long time ago now, we're going back a long way, but I remember just beautiful architecture. Everything was perfect. There was no graffiti, there was no crime, you didn't see gangs everywhere, you didn't see all the stuff going on now. You just didn't see it. It didn't exist. It was just, each country was very, like, you're in Germany, you're in Germany. Like, there's no doubt about it. You're in France, you're in France. You go to all these different countries and you know exactly where you are because of the culture. Now, the last time I went to Europe, It was not like that at all. And actually, I said to my wife, I don't think I'll ever come back to Germany or France. We went to Belgium, Luxembourg. We went to a lot of, I said, I just don't think I'll ever come back to these places because it just, especially the cities, they were so dangerous. I felt anyway. I just think the whole place has been massively destabilized, and I think it's getting worse. I don't see it getting better. I see it getting worse. And what we're seeing is now emigration, not immigration, but the emigration, which is where a lot of the skills are leaving. You've seen a lot of people just packing up and leaving. And we've got all of the data on that. I won't do another video on it because every time I do these videos, they get demonetized, they get shadow bans, I get warnings. You know, that's why we're streaming to other platforms as well now, because eventually when this ends here, I'll have other platforms I can stream to. But my audience is still mainly on YouTube. So there it is. So he's saying it's not the safest region in the world, even though the continent has a model of armed forces that is now solid. So again, this is an EU military, which they said, oh, no, we're never going to build an EU army. No. Well, that's what it is. It's an EU armed forces, which is and by the way, this is the thing with this. Remember what they're trying to do in the EU. And then it's not even, I thought when I was talking about it initially that I'd uncovered something, a massive secret. It's just in the open now. And now he's taking away the veto rights because they didn't like what Hungary did with the EU funding to Ukraine, right? So they're taking away veto rights. But the next thing is taking away voting rights. So, I mean, it's on the website. You can go on the EU and you can read it. And they want to have just 5 votes, basically. So they can have 3 that will sway a decision so that all the member states won't have the vote. I mean, this stuff is, to me, it's like a sci-fi movie when you hear all this stuff, that this is going on. It's unbelievable. Now, you have this EU military under the command of who? Who are these 5 people? They're not even elected. Well, they're inadvertently elected by the members who aren't even going to get a vote in the future. I mean, it's madness where this is all going. So either way, let's get back to it. So the continent has a model of armed forces now solid, comprehensive, and effective, such as the French army. However, when we look at Europe as a whole, we see that it has invested far less in its defense and security than the US or China, and that it finds itself in a global environment where proliferation is making a comeback. Russia, but also Iran and other powers. Now, he also talked about AI as a major threat, and I agree with Macron on this because it is a major threat. I just did this presentation on, I think this was Saturday's presentation, or I think this came out on Sunday, and I did a big presentation on this in the Patreon, and it's honestly, I highly recommend that you watch that presentation. I'll link it below because it does talk about where this is all going. It is worrying. The Economist, you speak about these forces that are gathering. Do they lead to a gradual death or a sudden death? Macron, things can fall apart very quickly. In Europe and everywhere else, they are creating a rise in anger and resentment. Now, what is he talking about here? He's talking about the changing, and I think we've got it here, democratic vulnerability. So he's basically, here it is, liberal democracy. He's talking about this rise in what he's calling the far right. So he's calling it the far right, but it's not the far right. That's the issue. This is it's just conservative politics. So he's saying, oh, this illiberalism, this wave of destruction. Well, they've created that. There's a reason that you see, liberal views rising, and then they'll crash down. You'll see conservative views rising. And it's all to do with politics, right? You just got to think of this as, well, we've talked a lot about tipping point theory. So when people are happy, everything's going good for them, right? Everything's great. Then they'll continue to vote for what it is in power there. Everything's going great. As soon as things start going badly, people's vote will shift. And they'll say, well, who is this moron? Who is this party in charge? Get them out. We need to get rid of them. Bring this party in instead. And that's how you'll see it. So you look across Europe now, people are getting poorer. We've got issues with massive inflation. Wages aren't keeping up. There's issues with housing. People can't buy housing. There's mass migration. There's issues with jobs. There's now looking at conflict. There's all these problems. So what do? The sort of people like Macron and some of the others, they say, oh, we need to put a stop to these conservative politicians and these conservative groups, political groups, like they're doing in Germany at the moment, banning political meetings. It reminds me all over again, early 1920s onwards, all over again. And they think this is the solution. Oh, we need to just ban these groups. We need to stop this. We need to stop that. No, as soon as you ban things, you make the people on that side even more angry, and then you lead to more conflict. So he's saying we need to stop all this, and that these hard right factions, these extremists are lying and making stuff up, and that's why we need to control social media. We need all these rules. Okay, so just giving context to where all this is going. He says basically we need to build a new paradigm, a new geopolitical, economic and societal paradigm for Europe. I honestly thought he was going to say we need to build a new world paradigm. So what is the time frame? What happens if Russia tries to attack another country that's not a member of NATO? Will we Europeans, NATO members, react? Macron, each time we have to do so according to the circumstances. The case arose in Ukraine, a country that's not a member of NATO, but is on European soil, 1,500 kilometers from our borders. In another unprecedented move, the Europeans reacted within 24 hours, meeting on the day of the, let's just use this word, invasion. France held the presidency of the EU Council at the time. I try not to use key words, by the way, like this word here, because YouTube flags the video and causes me issues. We immediately imposed sanctions and decided on the principle of supporting Ukraine. Then in the space of a few months, we took increasingly tough decisions. First, and again, this is what we're talking about with the stepping stones. First, we delivered tanks, then medium and long-range missiles. We also delivered air defense equipment, and we decided to open up the path for NATO membership in the European Union. So he's saying we've already made progress. Is this progress? I don't know. I really don't know if that is progress. It's just leading to more conflict. So do you stand by what you said about sending ground troops? Absolutely. Look, it's there in black and white. Absolutely. As I said, I'm not ruling anything out because we're facing someone who is also not ruling anything out. I have a clear strategic objective. Russia cannot win. If Russia wins, there will be no security in Europe. So again, we listen to the language, we listen to what they say, which tells us where this is going. He's saying about other leaders, he's convinced that all this is where all of this is going. Now, we could go on and on. This goes on forever, this article. And I also wanted to talk about some other things, but this has already gone on for a long time, this stream. And there's so much more I wanted to talk about. But I think we'll end that today, so we're not making this an hour-long stream here, because we've got so much more to talk about this week, as long as I'm allowed to keep streaming. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Take care. God bless. I'll see you tomorrow or the day after. All right.